I do think that there are still pockets of trade nonfiction that is still also focused on audience. There's an unfortunate tendency to think to ourselves that the author has to be a stand-in for the reader. And that if we are learning something new, we're supposed to be like the discoverer, the anthropologist, and like going into these books, and it's like dipping your toe and making it easy for a group of people to interact with something different rather than just like expecting that they can.
Right. Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and today we are joined by book editor Julianna Haubner. Julianna is an executive editor at Flatiron Books, where she acquires narrative nonfiction, history, pop culture, and social science books. She's worked with authors like Sophia Bush, Garrett M. Graff, and Haley Cohen Gilliland, and has acquired a number of best-selling titles, including 2 Pulitzer Prize finalists. We're chatting today about what exactly editors do, her taste in books, and the ever-shifting landscape of narrative nonfiction. The Stacks Book Club pick for July is Behind the Beautiful Forevers by Catherine Boo, which we will discuss with Julianna on Wednesday, July 29th. Everything we talk about on each episode of The Stacks is linked in our show notes. And if you like this podcast and want more bookish content and community, consider joining the Stacks Pack on Patreon and subscribing to my newsletter, Unstacked, over on Substack. Each place offers different perks. You can find community conversation and virtual book clubs over on Patreon, and then you'll get my writing and hot takes on the latest literary and pop culture news over on Substack. Plus, your support makes it possible for me to make The Stacks every single week and to make it free to all. To join, go to patreon.com/thestacks for the Stacks Pack and check out my newsletter at tracythomas.substack.com. All right, now it is time for my conversation with Julianna Haubner. All right, everybody, I'm so excited today. I am joined by Julianna Haubner, who is an editor, a book editor. And she's not just any book editor. She is actually the editor of some of my most favorite nonfiction books over the last few years. You know her, you might know her work. She was the editor of A Flower Traveled in My Blood, which we featured here on the podcast. She's also a friend of the show, Garrett M. Graff's editor, or formerly was Garrett's editor. She was at Avid Reader Press. Now she's at Flatiron Books. Julianna, welcome to The Stacks.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Before we even get into like what is an editor, which we're going to get into, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? When do you remember getting into books? What is your relationship sort of to books? Give us a little backstory.
Yeah, so I grew up in a suburb right outside of New York City, and I, like many in my field, was always a big reader growing up. But I think I had a really kind of intimate relationship with storytelling and books because I was raised by a bunch of educators. So I knew a lot about just the ins and outs of how books worked and how they came into play in your life. And it was an entertainment, but it was also education, which I think looking back kind of actually is maybe why the nonfiction thing happened. I always saw them as something to participate with and to learn from. When I was little, my grandmother used to read picture books to me, and used to kind of also go for the books that didn't have words in it. And she'd let me make my own stories on Post-it notes. So I always really loved just the interaction that you have with a book. Went through high school, really loved reading kind of recreationally, loved to write, loved English classes, went to a small college in Maine where I was an English and history double major, and then also did stuff for the newspaper, the Lit Mag, kind of all the traditional extracurriculars that you have in that space. And then when I was kind of older in college, I started doing some internships in publishing. I had a really amazing professor who was a trade nonfiction author. Her name was Tilar Mazzeo, and she is still publishing books left and right. She's amazing. And she taught this class that was comparative lit in the 21st century. And it was all that year's award winners. So it was the winner of the Nobel, it was the winner of the Pulitzer, the winner of the National Book Award, all fiction. But the whole point of the class was to really dig into what the culture what was happening in the culture at the time that these books kind of rose to the top in the awards capacity. And I think it was Out Stealing Horses was one of them. I want to say that was the Nobel. Okay. It was The Marriage Plot by Jeffrey Eugenides, Wolf Hall, and a couple others. But so it was really thinking critically and culturally about, you know, what was going on, that judges for these awards felt they were representative of the moment that we were living in. And I loved that class. And I spent a lot of time with TLR, and I was like, can I like write my senior thesis on bestsellers instead of, you know, diving into an author or kind of doing the traditional route of looking at a classic or something like that. And she was super game, which was amazing. And so I wrote my senior thesis on the longest running bestsellers of the 2000s and what they said about us.
What were they?
So they were Gone Girl, the first Game of Thrones book, World War Z, The Alchemist, but that was sort of the counterpoint.
Okay.
And then, oh man, there was one other, 50 Shades.
Oh my gosh.
So.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. At least The Alchemist, Gone Girl, and 50 Shades say, we hate women.
We hate women. It was like my whole argument. And I found it recently. And I was like doing this in it's hilarious now in my job to understand like the resources I have and the kind of databases I have to understand this better. Like I had no book scan as a college student. I didn't have anything to like actually like really interrogate this beyond just like the New York Times book review and a prayer. And I like going back, like reading it now, I was like, oh my God, you sweet, sweet child. But I basically like came to the conclusion that it was all like different forms of terrorism post 9/11. So Gone Girl is like marital, you know, terrorism in some ways. World War Z was biological terrorism. 50 Shades is like, you know, sexual terrorism, all these different things. And I thought I was a genius.
I love this.
Yeah. And it was like a hilarious all my friends were like, I was like reading 50 Shades in my dorm room. Everybody was like, what are you, I had like Post-its in it. People were like, what are you doing?
Right.
And so I was I was interning in publishing kind of at the same time. And I had really wanted, part of the reason I think I also did that thesis was I really had wanted to be someone who was like an arts journalist and like worked for the book review and kind of was in that space. And then when I was graduating in 2014, it was a period of time where a lot of newspapers were going digital. Like it was just sort of not clear where those things were going to be going. And I was introduced to the notion that like the publishing apparatus could be something that was like an alternative to that. I knew that I was like not built for freelance as a post-grad. So I was like, corporate is totally fine. And so I went to the Columbia Publishing course, which is a program in New York that does both book and magazine and now digital publishing and kind of gives you the lay of the land. And then ended up at Simon & Schuster at the end of September 2014 and was there for the flagship imprint. I was there for almost 6 years and then was working for an editor who became one of the founding editors of Avid Reader Press. So when they created that, they asked me to come with them and was there through the end of 2014 and had a really wonderful decade.
2024.
2024. Oh my God, 2014. 2024 and had a really wonderful, you know, decade there and got an opportunity at Flatiron and was excited to kind of try something new. But it worked on such incredible books over at Avid, like Garrett's and Haley's, and really got into, it was really great to be at Simon & Schuster with such a strong tradition of narrative nonfiction. You know, the place that has Doris Kearns Goodwin and Bob Woodward and David McCullough and sort of all of these books that I had really loved because I was like a total dad book reader as a...
Yes. That's why we get along.
As a 20-year-old college student ordering Doris Kearns Goodwin to my dorm room. So it was really great to kind of grow up in that, you know, editorial framework and to understand so much about it and to be around all these, you know, amazing editors like, you know, Alice Mayhew was at Simon & Schuster when I was kind of coming up there, Bob Bender, people who have just been such a cornerstone of that segment of the business, and to watch them work and understand how they did their jobs and what I could learn even just by watching was like such a gift. And yeah, now I'm here, just still doing dad books kind of a little bit.
Yeah. I'm so like, you give me hope because you're younger than me, but you're doing dad books, that like dad books will continue. Because sometimes I have these like anxious fears of like, no one's going to write the books I want to write because I'm too much online and everyone only reads fiction online, which I do want to talk about. But I'm like, Julianna is a reminder that there are still people who want to make dad books for people like me. Okay, here's my first question. It's a big one, but I think you can handle it.
Yeah, okay.
What is an editor? What do you do?
Lord. So it's funny because I have always thought of my job. I mean, my job is to edit. Like I edit books. That is definitely the most like, first important, foremost thing that we do. But really what the editorial job writ large is that I think a lot of people don't necessarily or immediately understand is it's really a ton of project management. It is we are handling, depending on where you are and kind of what size of your list and the imprint you're at, you're working on multiple projects at a time. You're really, the center conductor for all these different departments in the imprint and in your team to put these projects together. So you're not only editing a book when it's in manuscript form, but you're also monitoring, stuff that's in production. You're looking at stuff that is pre-publication, and marketing and publicity have taken over in some capacities and are forming campaigns. You're communicating with authors when they're thinking about their next book. You're really at every stage of the process. And it's a lot of switchboarding. It's a lot of knowing immediately where everything is. It's a lot of spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets. So there's a lot of spreadsheets.
This is also
involved.
why we get along.
It's a very, I mean, I'm a Cancer, but it's like a very Virgo job that people should be doing. And it's a lot of interfacing with a lot of different types of people. I think there's sort of a misconception that we in this job are all introverts and that we are sitting in a room by ourselves, like reading all day or editing all day. And we do that when we kind of have the opportunity during the workday. But much of the workday is like any other job that is kind of an inter-team and dealing with internal and external partners and stakeholders. We're on calls all day. We are in meetings. We're talking about jackets. We're talking about campaign ideas for marketing. We're talking about how to announce a book. We're talking about acquisitions. So there's really a whole universe of stuff that we are doing. And then we also edit, which is kind of amazing.
How many books are you working on at a given time? I know a few years ago I talked to a different editor and they said something about like 12 in, 12 out.
That's about right, I would say, because you are.
And for people at home, that means you acquire 12 books in a year, and you are the editor on 12 books that are published in a year. Obviously, if somebody's late, maybe it's 11, and then one year it's 13 or whatever. But like generally, you're acquiring 12 and editing 12.
Yeah, I would say it's like between 8 to 12 on either side of that spectrum, because sometimes you've got bigger projects that are taking a lot of bandwidth. So your acquisitions might be like, lower or higher or whatever at any point. But yeah, I'm usually doing about 8 to 12 at a time. And that is both paperback and hardcover, because usually there used to be, in the way olden days of publishing, there was sort of the separate entities of hardcover and paperback publishing. Now, a lot of imprints and a lot of houses do both under the same umbrella. So yeah, I'm looking at stuff that I am publishing in what we call front list, which is like new to market hardcover or even trade paperback originals, and also backlist, which is the paperback infrastructure. So yeah, there's quite a few at any given time, and they're all at the different stages. So, for example, right now I'm at different editorial and developmental stages of about 6 to 7 books. I have one that came out this spring, and then a couple that are in production coming out in the fall. So like it's always sort of, you're always on one part of the track at any different time.
Right. So like your job is sort of, from what I'm understanding, is like sort of 3 jobs. You're in charge of like acquisitions, new things coming in. You're in charge of actually editing and shaping the book, like quality control. And then you're also in charge of like putting the product into the world.
Exactly. And it's sort of,
and obviously there's different people who do those jobs with you,
yes.
But like you are the project manager on all 3 phases of a book, as long as you stay at the publishing house or whatever. Like as long as you're there and that's your book, you do acquisition-y stuff, editorial stuff and also like marketing stuff?
Yeah, so we delegate out to the other we let our really, really brilliant colleagues kind of take over, but we're the ones that, just because we've had the most sort of consistent touch on it, we often, we're always like in the room, but once it is something
Right.
outside of our spot, like, our team takes it over for us. But it's always like three, like you were saying, kind of groups of people. So it's like at acquisitions, like we're interfacing with agents. At development, it's, we talk to authors, and then we have our own like internal team that we're talking to. And that includes marketing, publicity, sales, art, design, subrights. So we're kind of always just there. But we luckily don't have to always do everything, but we're always kind of aware of what's going on.
As far as the editorial process goes, and I know that lots of people have this question, mainly because for some of my listeners, I have incepted them on this idea.
Oh, I can't wait.
I think, which is like, sometimes I read a book and I'm like, that was bad, and the author is to blame. And sometimes I read a book and I'm like, that was bad, and the editor failed. And sometimes I read a book and I'm like, that book could have been really bad, but the editor clearly helped the book. And sometimes I'm like, an author is a genius, and like, how did they come up with that? And like, what a lucky editor to have such a great author. That's all based on vibes from my reading life. And I think for a lot of readers who aren't as like plugged into the writing world, they're never thinking about the editor's hand in a book. They're thinking, this book is by Tracy Thomas. She wrote it. It's her thing. I now know how many people's hands are in the pot, but how deeply collaborative the relationship can be between an editor and an author. So I'm wondering, how do we as readers know what you've done, what the editor is doing? Like, how can we know if the editor failed or the author failed? And obviously it's not black and white, but like, how do we know?
So the goal is that you never do, kind of. I mean, I think one thing so for me personally, it's interesting because there's a lot of people in publishing who also write. And though I enjoy writing, I never like wanted to be a writer. So I think I also brought a separate framework of that, like I could view it very independent of my own tendencies and like what I would do with something, though I am like a hands-on editor, and I'm happy to tell my writers when like I'm suggesting a direction or suggesting things. But it really is a role that you need to be okay, and you enjoy the fact that you are kind of behind the curtain. And I think that I would hope that a reader could tell that I've been involved if they're even thinking of me. And I think it's also just like something where like a lot of editors are like, I'm not in it. I'm not part of the equation here. But I think the best compliment I can get from someone is that they really felt engaged and absorbed in the story. And I think that editors are additive in that space because, especially in nonfiction, I am someone who comes to the process as a fresh set of eyes. I've worked with journalists who have been working on stories for multiple years and researching and reporting, and historians who have spent a lot of time digging into content, and they know everything about everything. And it's funny that you said earlier, sort of that in the in-house and interactive infrastructure, we're kind of the translator, because I've also always said that I feel like I'm a translator between author and reader, that I can sort of stand in as a general reader coming to a book and saying, we're going a little off track here, or we haven't really gotten to know these characters or the story in a deeper way. So I think that maybe clarity is the biggest thing that like an editor can bring, and that I would hope that readers recognize is that there's someone who's just there amplifying whatever the author is already good at. And I think that in the different books that I've worked on, I've been, as I said, like extremely lucky to work with some pretty fantastic authors, and everything that I have contributed in the capacity I have was really in the headspace of maximizing what they already did so well. And I think that that's like I think there's a reason that there's like a pipeline, it seems, which is also why you and I get along, of like, there's like a lot of theater kids in publishing. There's a lot of people who played on teams. It's just like, it's a very kind of similar headspace we all have of understanding that like sometimes it's not always about like our exact presence in the process. And I think that it's something that like everyone brings together. And especially when you work with people, you work with writers for a bunch of different books. Like I learn just as much from my authors as they may pick up from going through my edits a bunch of times. And I've had authors who have said to me like, I now do this a little differently because I know you'll catch it. You know, like it's sort of a fluid back and forth thing that we both kind of get to like learn from and participate in. But the long and the short answer is like, we're sort of meant to be invisible, but the sort of ability to just make something really exciting for a reader. And I think in any capacity, we're really trying to work on books and do work on books that we just really care about. So I think that like when there's care taken from every part of it, from like title and packaging to copy to like the way the book is reading, like that's our handprint, is to just kind of show how much like we love it and why you should love it too.
Do you ever read a book? Not something that you're reading for work. Okay. Have you ever read a book?
Have I ever
read a book?
I actually can't.
I don't know how to read. Have you ever read a book like for pleasure now that you're in your job and been like, wow, if they had just like put the ending first or whatever, this book would have been amazing. Like, are you reading with an editor brain on all the time now?
Sometimes. It happens more with books. Because it's a very weird experience because I read in like kind of two separate tracks now. It's like I read stuff that are either classics or they're and I will say one of my hot takes is there are nonfiction classics. Classics are not just for novels. And there's
just a lot less old ones.
There's a lot less old ones. But so like I can read those books and books maybe from like 8 years ago and backward with that not turned on in my brain at all because like it almost feels like it's like pre me having that brain.
Yeah.
And when I read new stuff, most of the time I actually don't. It's only really when I like saw a book on submission. And I read just being like, because we see books most of the time with nonfiction, the majority of the time, we're getting a proposal for a book. We're not getting a full manuscript the way that it works on the fiction side. So I more am interested in like how these things got built out.
Got it.
And there is a little bit more of a development. It's also like why I mean, fiction editors do a ton of development with their writers too. But I loved that in nonfiction, I could kind of be on the ground floor a little more in helping somebody shape something.
Right.
So it's less of a like, I wouldn't have done that. It's more of like I didn't think to do that, or that's a really actually like interesting way they did this.
You're so much more diplomatic than me. I would be like, there were some books that I read that fucking sucked. And I was like, if you just moved this or cut this, the book would have been great. But I guess you have to be more polite than me. Yeah. Okay. This might be touchy. We'll see.
Okay. We'll see.
So one of the things I hear a lot from writers and authors is like this whole thing about sales and social media and having an opportunity to make a second book and all of these things. But I also hear this other piece that's like, well, you want an editor and an agent who are like sort of invested in your career as an author, and like maybe they don't care that your first book doesn't do great and like it just does fine, or maybe even like less than fine because they believe in you. So I'm wondering from your perspective, like what does success look like to you for a debut author?
Yeah.
Or an author earlier in their career?
Yeah. It depends on the book. And that's like maybe sort of a non-answer, but it really depends on what it is, because I can speak for myself, but every time I acquire a project, obviously, like the goal is as many people as humanly possible read this book. Like, you know, it would be amazing if everything hits a bestseller list, if everything has accolades, et cetera, et cetera. But success does look different for every type of project. You know, you have books that you read, that you have projects that come in and you read them and acquire them that you are thinking to yourself, yes, this is like a commercial project that like we know can do X, Y, and Z. Some stuff comes in that you're like, yep, this is like the critical darling of a season. This is another book is that there isn't a book about this topic or about, this person. And this will be the book that when people are searching for something about this, they will find, and it's a steady backlist opportunity. So success has a lot of different forms. In terms of kind of long-term trajectory, I think I love the idea. Some books I know it's going to be like a one and done, and actually there haven't been that many of them that I've had in my career, luckily. But I think I go into every interaction at acquisition thinking to myself, this is a partner. This is going to be a partnership if we do this. And sometimes it does take a book or two to, hit a stride. And I think that it's really important to have that stamina and to have that vision, not only for the book that's in front of you, but for the person and the partnership that's in front of you. And I think that, I'm trying to think if there's any like immediate examples coming to mind, but I see stuff in the market all the time. I mean, look at, I did not work with him, but, Michael Finkel in The Art Thief. I mean, that is like not a debut. That is multiple books in. And I think that all it takes, especially with nonfiction, and I think there is a parallel in fiction too, but in nonfiction, it's just like, it's just the right story lands with somebody. And a person digs up the right direction and the right weird person in history or in our current climate, and it just works. Patrick Radden Keefe.
I was going to say, Patrick Radden Keefe is the one for me that I think of all the time. Because he had 2 books before Say Nothing, but like it wasn't until Say Nothing. And not even when that came out. It wasn't until the New York Times put it on their 10 best of the year that it really, like, people had read it, but it popped off in a way after that was not necessarily like, now we think of him as like Patrick Radden Keefe, like, my boyfriend, but he wasn't that before.
And I think too that like, it's what I was saying before too, that like, all of it is a learning experience too. Debut writers go through writing a first book and they don't always like, there's things that are learned between those projects that really kind of are additive that just make them hit their stride in a different way too. So I think it's, you need to, and should be, and I think a lot of us go into it being very invested in the idea that like, there can and should be many. And what you're reading on the page of a proposal and of a book eventually is also the writing. I mean, you can have the best story in the world, and if that person doesn't have like the talent or the skills within their writing to really captivate you, the story doesn't mean anything. So if you recognize that talent and that capability in a writer, you are aware that they can do it again and again. So
that's the thing that's like sort of more exciting for you is like the writing.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too that like with nonfiction, it's a really kind of like special alchemy of somebody who can balance writing, reporting, research, storytelling, like I think the person who can really adjust that and dial certain parts of it up or down for people, Haley does it beautifully in A Flower Traveled in Her Blood. Like, it's sort of these breaks of deep history, but then such personal human forward action. And, Garrett does it really amazingly too. Like, I think there's just something in the way that they write that you read it and you're like, oh, this person just has their hands on every piece of this story in a really amazing way.
Okay, I have one more question for you before we like switch to your taste in books. And this is, I think, like kind of a big one and kind of a hard one. So we'll see how we do.
Yeah.
You and I both really love narrative nonfiction.
Yes.
Like we share a love for the same kind of books. Like Julianna and I have very similar taste. You skew slightly more history than I do. I would say I probably lean a little more like true crime cult-y than you do. But generally, people behaving badly, major bad things we're into.
Totally. Yes.
One of the things that I've run up against in the work that I do is that so few authors of color are given the opportunity to write the kinds of books that you and I like. Usually when I read a book by a Black author that's in kind of in this space, it's often like very personal narrative heavy.
Yes.
Or just like it'll be a book about Black people, but it'll be written by a white person. And so I'm wondering from your standpoint, like, what do you think is going on? Because it's not as if, you know, people of color can't write these stories. And it's also not as if they don't want to, but every year we're sort of presented with like a Martin Luther King biography written by a white man or a James Baldwin biography written by a white man. And that's not to say that these people cannot write our stories, but I'm just curious, like, what's happening that we're not getting them? What's your sense?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, it's something I think about all the time, because I mean, aside from my dad book proclivity, you know, one of my major, and I promise I'll come, it's going to seem like I'm going different, I'm coming back to it, but one of my big goals in my work is also widening the aperture of women in nonfiction, not only author-wise, but readership, because I do think there's a massive readership in women, as evidenced by the two of us on this call, that like
two of us, massive
audience, but the two of like, I think that it's a very like in some ways untapped community within the narrative nonfiction space. And I think a lot about books about women that are like also written by men. And I'm like, this is weird, but I think what it is I've noticed that a lot of them, that books like the ones you mentioned, you know, they're career authors, which I think offers a level of privilege and notoriety that and like, so, you know, supposed authority that they can tackle these big subjects. I also have to wonder if on some level it's almost like an access thing as well of who's being given access to these archives, to these, you know, large university libraries, to, you know, these infrastructures that can help them get whatever new material is necessary to, you know, to create these big new takes or even just generalized nonfiction, not even like the big biographies. And I'm not sure, it's something I grapple with, and I'm really not sure why, because I do believe that it's just a very different and more intimate and more, in my opinion, interesting experience to read a book about a certain, you know, person or place or community that is born of that community or place. You know, like, I think there's so much more detail and things, and I believe strongly, as I said, in like reading for education and reading for a widening of perspective. And I think that if you're not reading as like, I think it's important to read about things that are like different from you, but I also think you should read people who are different from you as well, because there's just things that get picked up differently. I wish I had like a firm answer.
I don't think there is a firm answer, but I feel like you're closer to a lot of this than I have my own theories, one of which is just like, I think sometimes when people are from the communities of which they write, there's like a feeling that they should weigh in a way when they're like from quote unquote marginalized backgrounds, in a way that like white male authority doesn't have to have an opinion because it's the true authority. You know what I mean? Like, so there's not the like memoirification of everything when it comes to men and white men specifically. I also think the like journalistic idea of bias that is like so prevalent, I think sometimes negates the work of authors of color, because people are like, oh, well, this is biased. Whereas like, and this is no shade at an author whose book I love, but like nobody says like Brian Goldstone is biased when he's writing a book about Black people who are homeless in Atlanta. But if another author had written that, a Black author from Atlanta would be like, well, they're from this place, or like there's like this thing that sort of undermines. And I mean, this quote unquote thing is like racism. I don't know why I called it a thing, like it was unnamed. And then I also think like, and I think to your point, like a lot of people are like career journalists, and so they get the opportunity. But I hate it. I mean, Isabel Wilkerson is a Black woman who wrote the shit out of The Worth of Other Sons. Like, I know we could do it. It's not a matter of, you know, it's like clearly something's going on the side on like the business side of it. It's not about like the talent side of it.
Yeah. And I think publishing, in particular, there's obviously a lot of pockets of publishing, but I think trade book publishing, especially, we're all, for the most part, of course, the last few years have made doing the job not in New York possible, but it's still a New York, centered industry. Yeah. I do think that there are still pockets of trade nonfiction in particular that is still also focused on audience. And, like the dad book thing. Yeah. Like, who are the dads that we're talking about when we talk about dads? And so it is also like that there's an unfortunate tendency to think to ourselves that the author has to be a stand-in for the reader.
Right.
That the reader has to be able to relate to an author moving through a subject, going into a topic or a place or a community. And that if we are learning something new, that means that we have to be kind of in that position of like, and I hate this word because it's probably very loaded, but like, it's like almost like, we're supposed to be like the discoverer or the anthropologist and like going into these books. And I think that's another layer of it, that just who we think.
We being like publishing,
publishing is automatically defaulting to thinking that they're publishing for is a very specific group of people, rather than realizing that like and I think like it's something that we discuss all the time, that people are really, I think, doing a lot of really amazing work to try to do differently. But I think traditionally that's also been the issue, is thinking to yourselves as well, like, and even like retailers, reviewers, like it's just what are these traditional thoughts of like who the target audience is, and maybe part of what you were saying about it being then having to be so hyper personalized, or a memoir element, is that idea that you are like trying to learn about someone else rather than just going into it, and it's like dipping your toe and making it easy for a group of people to interact with something different, rather than just like expecting that they can.
Right. Okay, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back. It is officially summer, and I have been spending so much time outside in the sun, running around with the mini stacks, living my best summer life. And after all of the chaos of a summer day with small children, there is nothing more relaxing than slipping into bed into my comfy, Cozy Earth bamboo sheet set. You've all heard me talk so much about Cozy Earth. I am obsessed, but these bamboo sheets, they are next level, okay? They're buttery soft. They somehow are getting softer with every wash, and they manage to keep me cool even when it's hot at night or during a nap, because the summer is also a great time for a nap. Cozy Earth is all about celebrating everyday comfort, and every single product I've tried proves that effortlessly. Go ahead and try it for yourself. There's no risk. Cozy Earth backs your purchase with a 10-year warranty, and they give you 100 nights to try your new bedding to make sure you love it. If you don't, returns are hassle-free. This kind of commitment is telling you everything you need to know about Cozy Earth and about the quality. Made from viscose from bamboo, it's breathable, soft, and built for summer. Head to CozyEarth.com and use my code THESTACKS for an exclusive 20% off. That's code THESTACKS for an exclusive 20% off. And if you see a post-purchase survey, mention that you heard about Cozy Earth right here. Hello. We are in the midst of summer, which is my favorite season, and also a very fun season over here at The Stacks. As always, we are bringing you a ton of great new reads, author interviews, and behind the scenes bookish gossip and chit chat. But if you find yourself craving a little more, consider supporting us on Patreon and Substack as well. On Patreon, which is our community-focused bonus content hub, you can join our virtual book club. You can be part of our private Discord. You can read with us for our year-long mega reading challenge. Plus, there are monthly bonus episodes. Over on Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter Unstacked, where I give my hot takes on books and pop culture and sports and food and whatever else I want. On both the Patreon and the Substack, you also have access to my nonfiction reading guide. But It only is available through the end of summer. So make sure you subscribe now to either Patreon or Substack or both to get access to that. And if you don't have a few dollars to spare right now, don't worry. There are free options on Patreon and Substack so you can keep up with the goings on around here. Making this podcast is a huge team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and Substack, you allow me to support my team so we can all continue to work together doing what we do best, which is bringing you bookish content, this very podcast. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other bookish people, support an independent podcast, come hang out with me, Patreon, Substack, or both. Go to patreon.com/thestacks and tracythomas.substack.com, and we will see you in the stacks. Have a business idea but don't know where to start? I know the feeling. I was there when I first started this very podcast. I quickly realized it required way more than interviewing authors and just like reading some books. There were scripts to write, brand assets to create, and eventually merch to sell. Luckily, by the time I was ready to sell, I had already discovered Shopify. If you've been sitting on a business idea, just know that Shopify makes it easy to bring it to life and start selling. Shopify Checkout makes shopping a breeze for your customers, offering a secure place for them to enter their information and easily complete their purchase. The process is even smoother after their first order. When they come back, their details are already saved, so they're only one tap away from securing a shiny new item or a comfy new sweatshirt in the case of the stacks. And since Shopify handles setup and checkout, you can focus on what you do best, growing your business. With Shopify, nothing stands between your idea and a real business. So go make it one. Start your free trial at shopify.com/thestacks. That's shopify.com/thestacks. We're back. I didn't prep you for this, but this is Ask the Stacks, where someone writes an email and asks for a book recommendation.
Okay.
And coincidentally, though I should have planned it this way, but I didn't. When the last question we were talking about authors in color and like narrative nonfiction, this question actually ties into that. So This is from Jessica, and they say, I'm a big fan of the Stacks. Shout out to my friend Sharon for inviting me to the live show in Chicago with Sam Irby and getting me hooked. One of the things I love about listening is that I read almost entirely fiction, and I get to learn about nonfiction books and hear from their authors in a way that can feel like less pressure than reading a whole book. I've started listening to audiobooks for the first time recently and made space for nonfiction that way. I have loved a lot of your recommendations: Madness, There Is No Place for Us, Bad Company, We Were Once a Family. Do you have recommendations for more books by authors of color, especially Black authors, that have the same combination of deeply reported and telling individual stories? I have 3 here, and then if you want, and I can go and then you can go. You only have to do one. Okay, so the first one is not by a Black person. The second 2 are. But the first one is Random Family by Adrienne Nicole LeBlanc. I have not read this book, but every journalist I know, I own it. Every journalist I know who I have loved on this show, from Brian Goldstone to Andrea Elliott to Roxana Asgharian to just recently Justine Vanderloon, they all are like, this is the gold standard of that kind of book. So if you want that kind of book, it's about a Black family, I believe in the Bronx. Did I make that up?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
In the Bronx. And I think this is the book that you want. It's by a woman, but she's not Black. That's what I have. Now, my second book just actually came to me while we were having this last conversation, is Tell Her Story by LaShawn Harris. It is about Eleanor Bumpers, who is the grandmother in the Bronx who was killed by the police in the 1980s for about $90 of unpaid back rent. And it was one of the early sort of like say her name type events in the 80s, similar to Michael Stewart. And it is LaShawn Harris is a historian, a Black woman historian from the Bronx, who was 10 years old when this event took place. So this is really, and this book is about, as you know, non-biased as far as like, there's not a lot of memoir. She mentions in the introduction, this is where I was, but she's not giving you her personal story. This is a true historian writing. It's very narrative. It's an incredible story. A lot of people don't know it. So I highly recommend that. And then my third and final is When Crack Was King by Donovan X. Ramsey, which follows 4 people in the 1980s and 90s, like through the crack epidemic in America. It profiles for people across the country. And it's really good and sort of on the spectrum of like reported. This is slightly more creative in style. It's like more lyrical, but not lyrical like fiction lyrical, but just like more lyrical in that genre, if that makes sense. It's still pretty fucking reported. It's deeply reported and researched and really amazing, but it has like a flow to it that just is like a little more stylized, I should say. So those are my three. What do you have?
So I have two. One is a little bit more in memoir, but I feel like it is a larger kind of subculture and like conversation. So the first is, I mean, it's like a pretty standard at this point, but I do think it is a standard for a reason, and that is How the Word is Passed.
Yes.
I mean, I just think that is, I really do look to that book frequently, even as an editor, of an example of just really incredible melding and like seamless melding of history, of reporting, of sort of that personal commentary. It's one of those books that is like timely and timeless. Like, and I think it's also structured in a way that I love, which is there is a singular arc and journey that you are following, but there is a capability of like putting it down and picking it up, and that you can kind of go through these different phases with it. Actually, I have two more. Oh my gosh. I'm like, now that I'm thinking of them. The other is, that's the memoir, but also kind of is a larger commentary on stuff, is The Beauty in Breaking, which Michelle Harper, I think is her name.
The doctor, right?
Yes.
Doctor.
And she's an ER doctor. And it's just it's also like lyrical. It's not like, it's not like a Grey's Anatomy kind of like treatment of the ER. But it sort of blends what's going on in her life with having to go into a place where you have to leave that at the door, and you have to take care of different types of people with different types of problems. And it just is a really amazing look, not only at, because I really love books too that are showing you and are really immersing you in different types of workplaces or different types of lives, and like moving through the world. And I think there is such an added not even added weight, but there's just a really fantastic layer that is placed on that book, because you are aware that she is a Black woman. As a doctor, you not only know kind of what it required to get her there, but also, she's very aware throughout the book, if I remember correctly, like when she sees certain patients, she's very aware that like if roles were reversed, she would be in a different situation too. So it's a really kind of eye-opening and like lovely book. And then another one that is kind of like a standard at this point, but a really great one nonetheless, is Saidiya Hartman's book, Wayward Beauty. Oh my God.
Oh, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, Wayward Lives, Experiments, Beautiful Experiments.
It's like a vocal exercise.
It's a combination of the words Wayward Lives and Beautiful Experiments. But it could be Beautiful Experiments, Wayward Lives. I think it's Beautiful Experiments, Wayward Lives.
Yes. And another one that like uniform arc, but you can kind of pick up and put down. I love the ability to kind of like poke your head through a window and kind of like see all of these different people and worlds. I do have one final one, which is,
oh my gosh, I love this.
Yeah. Which is, again, it's sort of a hybrid of what we're talking about. But, recently they republished a memoir. I think the person who put it together is not a person of color or Black, but, it's Josephine Baker's memoir.
Oh, yes.
And they kind of reorganized it all together. It was published and was like long out of print, and then they sort of recontextualized it and brought it back. I'm a big 1920s theme reader. I love it. But I read that book and I just loved being immersed in that world, and she was so fantastic and just had such a fascinating life. And so that's another one that's really great to also have it be a story, and a story kind of adjacent to a lot of history that other people usually like already, and then just getting the front row seat to it. So Now I went from 0 to 4. So
I know. I love
this.
This is why I love this. Jessica, thank you for asking. Let us know how we did if you read any of our picks. And then everyone else, email askthestacks@thestackspodcast.com to have your recommendations read on air. All right, Juliana, 2 books you love, 1 book you hate.
Okay. So my 2 books that I really love are Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker.
Okay.
That is a book that I recommend to a lot of people. I think it's, again, a similar thing of just like really, and again, Bob Kolker, that was the second book and it totally exploded.
I just went back and read his first book this week because I knew that you liked him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to read his 3rd book that comes out this year. And then I'm going to have done the complete Robert Kolker trilogy.
So that book is like a great blend of reporting personal, like he's not really a character, but you see through him this like saga of just understanding and unwinding it. And then
it's about a family with like a lot of the family has schizophrenia. Right?
Yeah. And it's that the first kid is diagnosed, I want to say in like the 50s or 60s, because they had like 8 or 10 children. And so the between the first diagnosis of one child and then the last one who's diagnosed, which I think is creeping up into like the 80s, maybe, you see the full scope of like how schizophrenia has been treated. Like the first child, they're telling the mother that like she's done something to damage them psychologically. Right. And then as they get through, they're finally in a place where, medically and chemically, they understand what's going on. And then the other one that I really love and has a very important place in my heart is The Interestings by Meg Wolitzer.
That's fiction.
Yeah, it's fiction. I know. I have one of each.
Okay.
So I just think that book is so great. And I think it's like a very good, like multi-purpose. You can give it to someone at any point in their life because it travels the 40 years.
Got it.
But I'm trying to think if there's one other.
No, just 2.
Yeah, just 2. Okay. And then the one book I hate.
But now you have to share the book you hate. You only do 2 because I'm eager to get to the hate.
I know. So in terms of a book I hate, I have a problem. It's just annoying because I actually I love this author in every other part of his canon. But I have a lot of issues with In Cold Blood.
Oh, wow. Hot take. Holy shit, did not see that coming. Okay, why do you hate it?
So like I said, Capote, I've read everything about him.
But we gotta discuss
Philip
the work.
Seymour Hoffman as Truman.
Sure. Great performance.
Maybe it's because I learned too much about Capote down the line that I I think maybe the context has ruined it for me. But I do think that it is a book, and every book has an agenda, to some extent. Like there's a reason, especially with nonfiction, like you always go into it wanting to write about something. I find it somewhat inorganic and sort of not, I guess inorganic is the right way. Like I think that he not only inserted himself into a lot of it as was his way, but I think that he also went into something deciding how he wanted it to go. And so I think in nonfiction, that is something that happens, of course. But I do think that you can tell when an author wants it to go a certain way.
I see.
And that their feelings have come in. And I also have since learned that there is a lot of questions about whether part of that book is also written by Harper Lee. So
yes, I've heard this. I've heard this take. What's the last great book you read?
Ooh, I gotta say, I am not brown nosing here, but Stack's favorite, Gods of New York, was
banger.
Really up there with.
That's
for
a
me.
Banger. That's a sneaky banger too. Did not get enough appreciation.
Banger. It really did not, and like I know that I mean, living in New York. Ladies and Gentlemen, the Bronx is Burning is like kind of a cult favorite. Like I feel like a lot of people have that on their, shelves, and it's a really I think that book is fascinating too. But I really was impressed by there is a very thin line, I think, in nonfiction of those types of kaleidoscopic books veering potentially into survey, which is like, which turns it into like a totally different kind of book. And it's more just like, oh, and like listing and kind of giving you a full scope rather than like sticking to narrative framework. And I think he did it absolutely masterfully of covering the amount of ground that he did, but like keeping it organized and making you realize that like everything felt intentional about that book.
Yeah.
It did not feel kitchen sinky. It did not feel like, oh, I have to talk about these different people or moments and like they have to connect to these. I think that's one that I was just very impressed by the execution in that book. And I just loved reading about a place I'm very familiar with, but a time that I was not alive for and had heard so many. I love books too that like are taking something that I've heard about and think I know about and then telling me how dumb I am, basically.
Right.
And that was one of them. And it was really great. It also was like I felt like with this book and the John Gans, I felt like every 3 pages, and I mean this in a very complimentary way, but I was like, not this man again. Like there's like, I feel like every time a name came up that I was like, these expletives are still around. Like I was like, not him. Like,
every time that he said Giuliani, I was like,
oh my God. Ale. Like, it's just, like there's just so many people that I was like,
and then they'd be like Spike Lee and I'd be like, oh yay, fun. I know him.
Exactly.
I was like, finally, somebody I like. I'm like, back to the movies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I loved that book. I thought it was a great recommendation from you.
Thank you. I love to hear this feedback. What are you currently reading?
So I just picked up Yuppies by Dylan Gottlieb, which was just the kind of focus of a newsletter from Anne Helen Peterson, who I love. And think does really great work in also this space. And I was on like a tear of, which is like how the Mahler book came into, like I was on like a tear of just like 80s, 90s, culture and history and sort of trying to, because I really like stuff that just kind of, I look to books a lot of the time for like, why are we like this?
Yeah.
It's been really nice to like recontextualize all of my feelings about what's happening in the world now with like understanding kind of like where it came from and where the parallels are. So this is about the 80s in New York specifically and the rise of this, image and stereotype and reality of this like, upwardly mobile class of people, because yuppie is young urban professionals, I think it is. And sort of just like, this was, it seemed, I think it's coming out of a dissertation that the author wrote. So there's a little bit of an academic bent to it, but it's really interesting of just like how it interacted with capitalism and like the greed is good era and all of these different things. So that's what I just picked up. And then I also, yesterday actually picked up a copy of, is it We Own This City, the new book about Wilmington, North Carolina?
Oh, yeah.
That's been on my list, so I got a copy of that too. My like summer reading is like deep history.
It's so not what everyone else's summer reading is.
Yeah.
And I feel like I do some of my best work in this time. I do some of my deepest, most fucked up stuff between May and September. I'm just really digging into the archive. I feel like last year I read Nazi Billionaires during this time frame, just a casual, light.
That one's also your rec.
That book is so good. That's a Patrick Radden-Keefe rec. I got to give him credit.
Exciting.
What are some books you're looking forward to reading?
So, I'm really trying to move through books that I feel like I missed because with my job, like I'm working like about a year and a half out.
Yeah.
So I'm always like aware of stuff that is in the pipeline at like other houses or with other editors. And then I just kind of like, and I always like get the galleys or I have them on pre-orders and things like that. And then I'm on a different cadence than kind of the general public in terms of what they're reading. So I haven't gotten to London Falling yet, which is like number one on the list. I also have some, is it The Source of Self-Regard? That's Toni Morris, that's nonfiction. Yeah. So I kind of have just stuff that I feel like I've had a copy of forever or have had in the back of my head is something I really want to read and get through that I haven't gotten to yet. Another book that it's kind of like a fun, like beach, my equivalent of a beach read is, like Amy Odell's book on Anna Wintour. Like I kind of want to sit, like, a crisp little glass of rosé and read. And then I also have a couple of the old, like the really old ones. Like, I have like David Halberstam's The 50s and like Studs Terkel's Working. I like really want to read. Also been trying to make my way through What It Takes for like however many years I've been that Richard Ben Kramer. But I love.
Have you ever read The Power Broker?
Oh, Tracy, you have.
Have you done it?
The Power Broker is going to be the book that like when I retire, I will finally be able to read that book.
I've not read it either.
I love like I loved the documentary, Turn Every Page, that was about Robert Caro and Bob Gottlieb. And like, I love Bob Caro also just for his whole approach. Like his book Working is actually like an amazing, quick, but like really informative and amazing book. And this summer, actually a colleague of mine, and I were like, we're going to do it. Like, we're going to read The Power Broker. And we put in our work calendars. Like, we have the dates of like how many chapters. We did it after the 99% Invisible plan that they did. And then I had to do a bunch of edits, and that book has been like, it has Post-its in it, but it's on my nightstand. So I'm gonna get to it. It's my goal.
It's okay. I just
that's my white whale.
Yeah. I'm like, I want to read it, but also I'm like, I'll never get to it. It's fine.
It's also one of those books, like, I don't know if you can do on audio, because I feel like I want to like really.
I started it on audio, and the narrator was can't do this for 48 hours.
Oh, no.
You know what I mean? Like if I had started it and been like, because like I love a biography on audio, like a big boy. Like I read that Reagan biography on audio and was just like, let's go. But if because it's an older book, the narration is kind of older and it's like a different style. It's like a little more like Robert Caro.
Oh, no.
Do you have a favorite bookstore?
I do.
What is it?
My favorite bookstore is Northshire Bookstore in Manchester, Vermont.
Okay.
Though I grew up in the New York suburbs, my parents now live in Vermont, and I spent a lot of time there, and I was a competitive skier growing up. So that was like my hometown bookstore, because my town did not have an independent bookstore until the year my parents sold our house.
So you were actually holding the town back. Your family was holding the town back. They were like, we
true.
want to put a bookstore here, but we don't want Julianna to be happy.
We don't want her to be happy. But yeah, Manchester, it's and there's also one in Saratoga also, but their original's Manchester.
What's the last book that made you laugh?
I would say it was laughter. I'm actually quite hard to make laugh in a book. It was more laughter of like self-recognition in some of the stuff that was happening. But I was reading Famesick, Lena Dunham's book, and I was just like, oh man.
Did you like it?
Drag me. I have like mixed feelings. I really loved it because I do think she is like a very good writer, and I think she just like knows how to put this stuff together. Like I think for all the other mediums she's done, like she's a writer. Like she just she gets it. And I appreciate that it was something that she took so long to put together, because I do think if it had come out at any other time earlier than this, it just like wouldn't be landing the same way.
Yeah.
I did at times, it brought me back into the slightly triggering millennial, like 2012 to 15 era of just like hyper personal and like hyper disclosey writing that I was just like, I don't need to know all these things.
That makes my skin crawl. I haven't read it yet. I think I'm going to, but I have anxiety about doing it. I'm like very apprehensive. What's the last book that made you cry?
I think it was probably a novel. But I cried at the end of, weirdly enough, Into the Blue by Emma Brody, which was recently like a Jenna pick or a Reese's pick. But that book that book made me cry. But one book that has made me cry a few times, because I've reread it over the years, is Random Family, actually.
Okay. Okay. I need to read that so bad. What's the last book that made you angry?
I gotta say, like, I mean, it seems like a cop out, but like, Gods of New York kind of made me angry, like, and not in like a way that it was like intended, but just I read it feeling very frustrated, and I find it happening with a lot of nonfiction books lately, but like I am getting increasingly frustrated of our inability to like learn from ourselves.
Sure. Sure.
And so I like read it just being like, it's all just been here and we should be learning more things. But I did recently, the other book that has made me, another book that made me angry. I'm not far into it. But the book that just won the Pulitzer for general nonfiction.
Brian Goldstone's book. There's no place. Brian
Goldstone. Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah.
That's rage-inducing.
Like, it's just one of those things that I like it on like an intellectual, but like a soul level. It just like makes you
want to rage. So, totally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What is your ideal reading setup? Location, time of day, snacks and beverages, accoutrement. Mm-hmm. Please explain.
Yes. So my ideal is on a screened-in porch, specifically the screened-in porch of my parents' old house.
Okay. How East Coast of you.
But it was, we had like trees all around it. So I need to be like somewhat outside, but like somewhat shielded from the elements, I guess.
Yes.
With like a big glass of like water or lemonade and also like a glass of wine. I just like love having those options. And then like golden hour. Like I just feel like it really, I love the idea and the feeling of it being light and fading and then realizing that I want to go inside and keep reading. Like I want sort of that feeling of like, oh no, I like don't want it to end. And so I keep going, especially now with like phones and email and all these other things that can take your attention. Like I like feeling as though I'm actively choosing to stay with a story.
This is a very good answer. Okay. If you were a teacher in high school, what is a book you would assign? You can pick your subject, you can pick whatever, but like you're a high school teacher, what are we giving the kids to read?
I am giving the kid, I gotta say, I really think that journalism is not well taught. Like I'm giving them Hiroshima. I'm giving, like just Martha Gellhorn, who I think is like criminally undertaught and underread. I'm giving even like Capote's profiles. Like I think there's like a real segment of just like what we think of in high school as like history and reading and understanding the world. Like I had a teacher who like gave us like we read old New Yorker articles about like World War II and all that stuff. And it was just like, it was short that it wasn't like, assigning a ton of stuff, but it also just, it was fun and captivating, and I think especially now with like all these concerns about like attention spans and everything, like just like really good journalism should be taught, and it should be. And I also think that like by extension, you're teaching people to critically read the news, and I think that's like really important. But I will say, if I was ever on an episode of Subway Takes, my biggest like hot take is that with high school, we are not, and maybe it's different since I was there, but I think that we are taught, especially with like fiction and then other certain types of nonfiction that you typically read, it's taught too much to theme and archetype and like adapting to lessons for high school kids. So like Catcher in the Rye, it's like, oh yeah, this is like a book to teach you about being a loner and like being a jerk. And like it should be taught alongside Salinger's biography so that you can understand that like his first day of combat in the war was D-Day. And like, and he, had a nervous breakdown when he was serving in the army and then was like in Nuremberg, like doing, denazification processes, and came back to New York to his rich Upper East Side family, and nobody would talk to him about the war. And so all the phonies like it's PTSD. So like, it's just like
Right.
that changes so much of how you think of and read that book. And I think we need to like, context is so important. And I think we just need to do more to do that in schools.
This is a great, it's not a great Subway take, but it is a great take. I feel like we need to do Subway takes for books. It just feels like too hyper specific for Subway takes. I feel like half the audience would be like, aren't you supposed to be giving me a take about like toenail clipping or something?
They would fully be like, please go in the other car and like find someone else who has a more compelling take.
This is the right audience for your take.
Dying.
Yeah, this is the right audience for your take. Yeah. Okay, last one. This is from the New York Times. Buy the book. If you could require the current president of these United States of America, and you're our guest in July, so it's the 250th anniversary, and we've got this shit president. What would you want this fucking guy to read?
Oh, God. I mean, the answers are coming to me in various capacities that can, you know. I think it's a trap because the books that I'm thinking of would not be read. So it's like, you know, I do think that anybody, you know, leading this country should, you know, probably know what the Constitution looks like. But aside from that, I really do think that, well, I have two. One is quicker, but I do think the poetry and work of Phyllis Wheatley is like critical and also should be taught. And I think now it is taught a little bit more, but I think that is a key just perspective on this country in the light of the 250th. I think that's just like, it's a writer who I think is not often given the due that is needed in general education. And I also think that Jill Lepore's These Truths is really an incredible book. And I think that to kind of get a look on history that still has, you know, it's not a perfect one by any means, but I think that it's a different perspective and something that takes into account our more contemporary views of things.
Okay, everybody, the great Julianna will be back on July 29th for our book club discussion of Behind the Beautiful Forevers. Yay. Is that right? Behind. Behind. I got it right. Don't ever doubt me, you know? Don't ever doubt yourself. Behind the Beautiful Forevers by Catherine Boo. You've never read it, right?
I have not. It's on my list forever. So very exciting.
Me too. I'm really excited to read it. I think there's going to be lots to discuss. Everybody else read it with us. You have until July 29th when the episode drops. Julianna, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was so lovely.
This was wonderful.
Always a pleasure.
And everyone else, we will see you in the stacks. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you again to Julianna Haubner for joining the show. Our book club pick for July is Behind the Beautiful Forevers, Life, Death, and Hope in a Mumbai Undercity by Catherine Boo. Julianna will be back to discuss the book with us on Wednesday, July 29th. If you love The Stacks and want inside access to it, head to patreon.com/The Stacks to join the Stacks pack and check out my newsletter at tracythomas.substack.com. Make sure you're subscribed to The Stacks wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please take a moment right now and leave us a rating and a review. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram, Threads, and now we're on YouTube. And you can check out our website at thestackspodcast.com. Today's episode of The Stacks was edited by Christian Duenas with production assistance from Sahara Clement. Additional support was provided by Cherie Marquez, and our theme music is from Tagirajis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.